Hi, my name is Matt Ackerson, and this interview is sponsored by SaberBlast.com. How do you grow your business in a fast, efficient way so that you can achieve your goals but still have a life? Well, today's guest, Callie Azevedo, does exactly that every day for her clients who are entrepreneurs. She is a business systems and marketing automation expert. Kelly, welcome to the program. Thanks for coming.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me today.
So Kelly, to begin with, it'd be great to understand how you came to start your business, She's Got Systems. Why don't you give us a little bit of background?
Sure. So I started off as most people did, coming out of college, working in different jobs in corporations here in the San Francisco and Sacramento Bay Area. And what I noticed was that in every position I had, I ended up taking on a ton more responsibility than the average person. And in some cases, I worked two different departments, or I split my time and then covered two desks. And it all came to a head in the last desk job that I had. And during a review, they told me that I was doing the job better than they'd ever seen anyone do. I was more efficient, and I was effective because I didn't spend a lot of time, making mistakes and correcting them. And I even went to Europe for 2 weeks, came back, and caught up on my desk in about 8 hours. And I was very excited by this kind of review that I was better than anyone else they'd ever seen in the position and expecting to get more responsibility or a raise. And instead they said they were cutting my hours and my pay by 20% because they didn't need me as much. And it really frustrated me because what it showed me was that I had created some great systems for the company that would allow their workers to be more effective and more efficient in my position and in a few other positions, and they were taking that for advantage. So I transitioned to start working with entrepreneurs because I thought if there was anyone out there who appreciated speed and who would actually pay more to get things done faster and not, in a roundabout way, punish their employees for being more efficient, it had to be entrepreneurs, because they understood that they had to, innovate quickly, make money, and get out there. And I knew that I could create the systems to make that happen, and started working, with several 6- and 7-figure online businesses, learning the ropes. And then about a year after leaving my corporate job, founded She's Got Systems and began working with even more people this way.
I think a lot of people can really relate to that because I've heard so many stories of entrepreneurs who are laid off and then that's their motivation or that's their opportunity to start their own business. For me, it was really I just didn't want to work for anyone else, to be honest. But for you, Kelly, was there any evidence growing up that this is what you would do? You would focus on business systems?
Yeah, I was actually raised by an engineer, so we had things like this all the time. We had systems for going camping. My dad's very, very methodical, so there's the right way to do things, and I was the kid who at 5 or 6 years old was rearranging the groceries in the shopping cart so everything would fit. And it's just the way that I naturally approach things, and having a system, for myself or for studying or whatever it was just really natural to me. And, when I came down to choosing a business, I thought, maybe personal organizing. And when I was kind of weighing the options, I realized that it didn't really bother me personally if somebody's, house was a mess and they couldn't find their car keys. But if their business wasn't running systematically, they were going to lose money. They could lose their business, and it would have a much bigger impact. So I decided to work in businesses, kind of the way a personal organizer would, to help you get things systematized, help you have a routine, so that the business could be successful. And it was just a skill that I'd been doing for years and had never really appreciated until other people didn't appreciate it. And then I realized that there was a lot of value there.
It's such an awesome story. I think it'd be great for our audience if you could dig down a little bit deeper and really help us, just understand from an example, the kinds of systems and that you can actually bring into a business, maybe like from a past client or something. Sure. Like this. Just give me like a concrete example of of what that actually looked like, because a lot of people want systems,
Yeah.
but they want the 4-hour work week. They're not willing to really understand practically how to apply it.
Yeah, everyone wants to talk about freedom. And I think one of the important things is that we try to conquer the problems that you don't want to be working on. So a lot of my clients don't want to stop working. They think it's fun, they love what they do, but there's those few problem areas. And one that really stands out is about 6 months ago now, I was working with a client who'd flown in for a half-day session. And as we were going through, the business and talking about simple finance systems, how they're collecting income, the client revealed that they were having a hard time getting their clients to pay after the work was done. And sometimes they had ongoing contracts. Sometimes they would work for free for 2 or 3 weeks, and he spent a lot of time chasing down clients. And I could tell it was frustrating because there was about 80 people in the company. They were growing constantly, and yet they needed to get more stable cash flow. And so we devised a system of changing the way that the payments and the invoices were sent and received. And, I said, okay, well, you should write an email to your clients explaining why this is a benefit for them and that it'll actually help you serve them better. And I kind of got a blank stare, and my client says, yeah, can you just do that for me? I said, absolutely. So I wrote this email to my client's clients explaining the new system of payments, the new system of collections, and how it would help them have better projects, be on time, stay focused, all the great things. And we sent it out there. And then we did a follow-up about a week later to catch any stragglers. And when I checked in with the client to see how it was going, he said, we've had better collections and more income than I've ever had in 5 years of business. And I don't know why we didn't do this sooner. And so
I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to. Me in particular, my last business was a web consulting company, and I used to hate having to chase people for money. It's no fun, especially when you want to focus on the more creative pursuits. So because that's something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to, and maybe you don't have to give us examples from that particular client because that might be confidential, but what are some systematic tactics that you would use to improve the collections process?
Yeah, well, if it's an ongoing contract, and this was very similar to like ongoing web development or app development, if it's an ongoing contract that you're expecting for anywhere 3 to 6 months, but you're going to get paid in increments, we actually required the clients put a credit card on file, and that they would get the invoice, but you almost assume that it's approved unless you hear back from them. So instead of the manager taking 2 or 3 weeks to get around to approving an invoice, we would send an invoice and say, your credit card will be charged in 4 days. If you do have a dispute, let your project manager know right away. So it put the pressure on them to really look over for any disputes they might have so we could settle those quickly. Because the longer you waited, the more memories fade and it's harder to really come to an agreement. And then because they had a credit card on file, the billing was able to happen on the same day every week as expected. The client knew how much they were getting charged, and the business was able to begin automating payments. And the kind of twist that we put in is that because my client had a full practice and they had a waiting list, if the credit card wasn't on file and if things weren't getting paid on time, then their end user risked having their project put on hold. And because there were so many projects in the queue, the project may be on hold for several months, not until they paid, but until the team had time again. So it put the pressure on the clients to say, we're a great firm, we're busy, we have a lot of people waiting, and if you can't pay in a consistent and regular manner, then your project will be put on hold maybe for a few months as we serve other clients. And it worked really well because it showed the clients that the firm was really important and was busy and was good and was also not going to tolerate a lot of delays in payment because they didn't have to. And I was thrilled. And 6 months later, it's a strategy that's still working. And like you said, it's taken the work off of my client's plate so that they can really focus on the development. They can focus on the team. They can focus on innovation and not focus on getting money in the door so they can keep paying the workers.
Yeah, so it sounds like is it just a matter of systematically setting rules and saying, hey, like this is our standard, we're not going to go beyond it, and just making sure that clients are in line with that, and if they're not, then saying, okay, we have to pass, we have to find different clients.
It's just simply saying in any situation, this is the way we work, and not apologizing for it, and allowing the clients to decide if that's acceptable to them. And I mean, in my own business, sometimes I've had clients who wanted to, do a package. Maybe they're going to do like 4 or 5 months, but they want to do a month and then take 6 months off, and then do 2 months and take 4 months off. And I just say, I'm sorry, that's not how I work. And, I give them my reasons how it doesn't serve them. And then they get to choose if they'd rather work my way or work with someone else. And it's just so nice to be clear up front and to have that kind of, that internal rule and a system for it, so that you don't get caught saying, well, I guess I could do that, and then resentful later.
So Kelly, for our audience, I really want to drive home this idea of what it's like to be without systems and then to actually have them, and what the difference is between the two. So is it possible, could you give us some sort of, could you paint us a picture where the business owner doesn't have the systems and the business is really relying on him and bottlenecking at him? And then in the other case, what is it like to actually have those systems in place, and how does it change the lives of the people who run the business and the business owner?
Yeah, I like to think of your business a little bit like a restaurant, and that in the beginning, you're only serving so many people, and you probably can do it all. I mean, you're the short order cook, you're the hostess, you're going to bring out the invoice, you're going to, cash them out, you're going to bring in refill water, you're going to do everything. And that's how most entrepreneurs work. They're running around their restaurant, serving everybody in every capacity. And in addition, they're working with, they're doing their own taxes, and they're checking with city inspection, and they're paying all their own invoices, and they're basically running ragged, and all they can think about is adding more menu items, of expanding the restaurant. And what they are not seeing is that if they don't get help in there, then they're going to be drowning, because the marketing will work, you will get more clients, and then you're going to be resentful because you're the one serving them all, and you just need a nap. And, people don't realize that when you hire someone, it creates a burden of training. And you're either going to let them go and figure it out on their own, which isn't a great strategy, or you're going to actually spend more time training someone. So what systems do is allow you to actually slow down just for a while to kind of figure out how things should work, and then, create these like owner's manuals, these operation manuals that say, here's how we do things. And it can be just super simple. Here's how I want your email signature to look. Here's how we follow up on a late invoice. Here's how we reach out to someone who wants to interview for, a radio show. And if you take a little bit of time to put those in place, you can expand faster. But just recently in Inc. magazine, they had a great article about the dangers of fast growth. And one of the biggest dangers was a lack of systems, because things are growing so quickly you can't keep your eye on it all. And there's so much room for a mistake or really, a disaster to happen, because things aren't, regulated, and you're probably going to get burnt out faster than you think, because while it's really exciting and fun to grow fast, it'll very quickly be overwhelming.
Yeah, Kelly, that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like, and I agree with this, like business systems are, they're essential for sustainable growth. I mean, it sounds like that's exactly like what you're saying here.
Yeah, and I really got a great picture of this a few weeks ago. I was home and the power went out, and I was trying to figure out something to do that didn't require electricity. And the only thing I could come down to was that I had this jar of coins I was going to go turn in at a Coinstar. And so I take this jar of coins down there, just going to get a gift card or something. And things are fine. I'm putting the coins in, and all of a sudden the machine jams up. And, I sat there for about 20 minutes while they had to fix the machine and get my receipt and all that. And as I was sitting there, I was thinking, this is exactly what happens in most businesses, is they're fine if like 1 or 2 coins are coming in, like the machine. And if you just dump a whole bunch in there at once, things break down. And that's what we do in our business is we think, well, I'm doing really well. I'm serving 5 or 6 clients and, I can do this. This is great. We keep marketing. We keep advertising. Our reputation's great. All of a sudden you have 100 inquiries and everything breaks down. And it's a big risk because your reputation's on the line. And at the same time, you are missing out on those hundreds of people who want to work with you or who are interested in your service because you don't have systems in place yet to serve them or to scale when it's time to scale.
So Kelly, before we move on, I really want to drive this point home. Can you provide us another example of how a business might look before it's actually systemized? For example, a new company is starting right at the infancy.
Sure. So I think one of the most common things that entrepreneurs struggle with is launching. And so they get this idea because most entrepreneurs I work with are really creative people. And they say, I've got this great product or program idea. Here's what we're going to do. And they spell out like the big picture and the team goes, yeah, let's do it. And they start working. And then as the launch progresses, they go, oh, we should do this. And the team goes, oh, okay. And they go do that. Maybe it's a promotion. Maybe it's a, get a coupon to bring a friend. And then the entrepreneur says, oh, we should do this. I should go do an interview or a webinar. And, can somebody create a whole bunch of slides for me? I'm doing an interview tomorrow. And the team kind of scurries around and gets it done, but they get it done. And, they're building and they're ready and they're launching. And, they say, oh, well, we promised all these bonuses. I guess we have to, set up a bonuses page. And, the team scurries away and they do that. And they're getting the launch done, and maybe they have a very successful launch, but there was no system in place. Nobody understood the scope of what they were going to do when they signed on. Some contractors are mad because they're now doing 3 or 4 times as much work as they were contracted to do, or it took way longer because the client just kept changing their mind. And, even then, all these people came in for a new program, and the program's not set up and ready to go, so the customers are a little bit annoyed. And the client, my client, they're just saying out there, oh, I just had a 6-figure launch, things are great. And inside, they're like, that was miserable. Everybody's mad at me, I'm stressed, I never want to do that again. And then they don't launch for the next 6 months or year because they just remember it was a horrible experience, even though everyone else is saying, what's the big deal, you made a lot of money. And they usually have to, deliver the program at that point, which then takes a lot of energy because they felt like they just ran a marathon for 3 days or 3 weeks launching. And then now they've got to deliver the program. And at the end, they're so burnt out, they're just going to take time off and, not launch for a while because they're exhausted. And that's what I see a lot, because it doesn't matter if you're launching and you get 5 sales or you're selling a program and you get 400. It's all about the way that you're running a launch and the scope of it and understanding what's in place so that your team can be ready and what needs to be done. Otherwise, there's a lot of late nights and there's a lot of frustration all the way around. And so a lot of my clients do work on a launch plan, and I worked with a client yesterday, and we're preparing a launch for March and April. And I love that there's enough time in there to put in all the pieces. And this client is actually working next week on content that won't be going out till March, knowing that by the time the launch comes in March, it's going to look great. It's going to be prepared. She's going to have rest and peace around it. And she won't have to completely stop her life to focus on this launch because she's been building the pieces along the way. And there also won't be any surprises of, oh, I forgot I needed a shopping cart, or I forgot that I actually have to welcome people once they join the program. All of those things are in place, and they're drawn out in a campaign, and they're detailed so that she can check off, yes, that email has been written. Yes, those graphics have been uploaded. Yes, that page is ready. So that the day that the launch comes, she just gets to hit play and see everything fold into place.
It sounds like this idea of creating a buffer is really key to producing results, Kelly.
Yeah, and that's the thing that most people get frustrated about, is that they don't have any buffer in their plan. And if you're already running a successful business, you've got clients, you've got your own stuff to do, you have a life. And so putting a launch on top of that is just adding so much more stress. And, but that it's that fight inside, because the creative side of you is like, no, we have this great program, you've got to get it out there. And everyone's telling you, you got to play bigger, you got to get out there, you got to reach more people. And the internal side is like, but this is going to be hell for the next month or two, and I just don't want to do it. And so it's that internal fight that we have as entrepreneurs, because we really want to do things, but we want to do them well. And it's hard to come to grips with that. Okay.
Agreed. So now we're going to move into the Q&A section of this interview. I managed to collect four or five different questions from the audience. Some of the people you actually know, they're mutual friends of ours. Okay. And the first one comes from Matt Turcott, owner and founder of North Shore Solutions, a web development company in upstate New York. He asks, how do you keep communications, especially virtual, for virtual projects? How do you keep a virtual team communicating well and managing projects successfully for the long term? And so for Matt, I can really relate to his story, because I've had this problem too, where you have these virtual projects and you're trying to run them and no one's in the same place, but they often will go off the rails.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I love this question, because the first thing that you mentioned about having a web design company is really critical to understanding how you should communicate, because you have to decide like what you need to see. So if someone is helping with copy and they have, a package, it's really easy to write back and forth what they want to change in copy. But if you have a web page mock-up, it's really hard to write out, the color behind the photo on the second left bottom should be different. So we use things like Notable for web page and web design, which gives you the mock-up and then allows you to write and point and basically note right on the design page exactly what needs to change. So some of your communication may need to be visually based, because otherwise you're going to spend a lot more time writing out something that you could just point to with an arrow and say, right here, something's wonky. So you want to understand what medium you need to communicate. And a lot of time I turn to video. I do this in the sales process. I do this with clients. I do this with teaching. And if it's something that you feel is getting really long and complicated as you're explaining a policy, or you're trying to teach a client how to do something, I love video. I love doing screen captures with voiceover so I can show them step by step how it works. Or also just, turning on my camera and talking to someone and working them through their issue. So there's a lot of different options you have there. If it's a matter of tracking what needs to be done or upcoming meetings, I use Asana, which is a project management software, and it's online. It's free for 20 people per project, and it's really great because you can assign things, you can have conversations, and you can track it so it doesn't get caught in email. But it also archives your old projects and your old tasks. So if you need to know what happened in a long-term relationship 4 or 5 months ago, you can go find out. So I like to use a combination, but Asana does have the capability of files. So if you have some of those visual files that you want to use in Notable or screen capture videos, you can upload them to a task in Asana and assign it to your client or assign it to a team member and say, please look at the photo or please watch the video. And we've had great success. I just did a client launch this last week, and the sales page and the order pages would be uploaded as drafts to Asana, and then the client was able to make comments and changes from there. So really it's understanding what medium you need to communicate in, if it's text-based, if it's visual, if it's interactive. And then after you have the medium, make sure everything's going in one place. Don't have 4 or 5 project management systems. Don't rely on email. Try to keep it all in one place. And this is one of those guidelines that I have for my clients is we do all our communication in Asana. And, they can, of course, email, but everything goes back into Asana because that's the best way that we've found to work and to keep things organized.
But what happens when, what sort of systems can you put in place, Kelly, when to try to account for the project not being delivered on time, or just a lot of unexpected things happen? And as I mentioned when I asked the question, this is something I can personally relate to because in my last business, which was a web consultancy, we would start these web-based projects for clients, and everything would start out well, but 9 times out of 10, something would happen. The project would take 30 to 100% longer than expected. Clients would take longer to give feedback. Designers would take longer to deliver. Developers too. And how do you account for scenarios like that where it's it's a service-based business model? How do you systemize around that and create a plan for these things that are always going wrong?
Really, for me, it's knowing who's in charge of the project. And I do project manage for some of my clients at the higher level. And so part of my job is touching base with the copywriter and the web designer and the graphic designer and making sure everybody understands their task and understands their deadline and then comes to me with problems. So we can pre-manage the problems if there's going to be delays. And like you said, there's always something that's delayed. And sometimes it's out of your control. Maybe you're waiting for a merchant account to get approved, or you've requested testimonials for the sales page and they haven't come in yet. So at that point, it's really, triage and awareness, because you can't expect a project to go perfectly. But if you don't know the problem until it's too late to fix it, then, you get stuck. So a lot of this is just being able to see the list of who's doing what the due dates are. In Asana, I like it. You can sort it by person, by date, by task. And so you can see, what's overdue. What's overdue by a day, what's overdue by a week. And then as a project manager, how that's going to affect the whole project. And then, your question about, how do you productize that? It's really difficult when you have an individualized business and you're going to work, individually with each client. But what you can do is create these little systems or ways of doing things. So, my business has a ton of systems, like what's our system when somebody stops paying? What's our system when a client isn't responding to, requests? What's a system when, we didn't know we needed this one, when a hurricane shuts down New York for 2 weeks and delays a launch? All of these things that could come into play. And then it's almost just like you're just waiting to plug in those results when you get the problem. And so a lot of times I can say to my clients, you know what, I've dealt with this before, let me check my notes, here's how we should proceed. And you can do that with your clients. What happens when our trademark is refused, or what happens when our server crashes, kind of modularizing those problems and seeing how you would deal with them. And for a lot of my programs, we actually have a very basic list of what we're going to work on. And because I individualize that for my clients, we just load the outline. So we wouldn't necessarily load, here's your way of following up with a client if they stop paying, but we'll load that we're going to have that discussion, and we're going to give them some templates, and we're going to help them decide how they will respond. So for me, because systems are so personal for your business, we like to have, the kind of very basic view of how we would deal with it. And then we work with the client to customize that to what they need. And designers, graphic artists can do the same thing. Like you can start off with, general logo, design or general elements, and then refine based on what your client wants.
So this next question comes from someone who's a mutual friend of ours, Rachel Rogers. Her business is rachelrogerslawoffice.com. She's a lawyer. And also her new business is hervirtuallawoffice.com, where she teaches other lawyers how to run a virtual law office. Her question is, one thing I want to ask is, how can I document my business processes so that I can use these documents to train an assistant or other professionals I might work with?
Mm-hmm. This is really the core of what I do, is being able to find someone like Rachel who knows what they do and has that process in their head, and they can do it blindfolded, and document it in a way that their team needs. So again, back to the medium, some processes are a simple checklist. Some are in software, so you probably need a video showing step by step. And most are a combination. So there's some text, there might be a photo, there might be a video. And I like to show people, when you think about it, let's say you just bought some new software, and you install it on your computer, and then you have that little window that pops up that's going to show you how to configure it step by step. That's really what a system is how we do something step by step. And so for documentation for Rachel, I would start with whatever makes you most comfortable. Some people like to write it down as a list. Some people draw it out. And then either, if your team can't translate it, and most teams they're not built that way. I happen to be built that way. Find someone who can translate it into a system that contains the videos, contains the images, has very clear wording, has templates, has the emails you want sent, has everything in it, so that you have that template. Here's how we send a newsletter. Here's how we post a blog post. Here's how our office, responds to a media request. And you just have each of those as little packets of systems, and they can be adjusted at any time when you find something that works better. And like Rachel said, then you're able to hand it off to an assistant and not worry that they're going to go off and do their own thing, or that they will get halfway through and then quit. And that's, I think, the biggest worry for people, is they're going to put all these time into their systems, and then their team will go, yeah, I've got my own way of doing it, thanks. And then they wasted a bunch of time.
So, Kelly, one thing that I can foresee that a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners are going to really worry about is getting it right, because you're going to invest a lot of time into this manual. You're going to want to make sure that you get it perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember not even a year ago, I was writing a business manual, and I was obsessed with just getting it right. So, what would you advise for people that have that concern? Is it an ongoing process?
I would say don't worry about perfection. So one of the early clients I worked with, we were doing a simple system for the newsletter, and I helped hire an assistant for him, and she did the first newsletter, and then we had a conversation about it, and he said, well, yeah, it's fine, but the image was wrong. And I said, well, you're saying there was a problem with how she loaded or, sized the image in the newsletter. Yeah. I said, that's great. He said, why is that great? I said, because 99% of your system worked. The only thing that didn't work was the image. So we don't have to worry about well, no, the font was wrong and you misspelled and the link didn't work. The only problem was the image. So we need more clarity from you on what was wrong and how to fix it. And by week 2, the image was perfect, and he's had consistency in his newsletter for the years since. So putting a system into place the first time doesn't have to be perfect, but it also doesn't have to be just slapped together, because otherwise you're going to get tired of revising it and just think that this is a waste of time. So I would say go for like the kind of 80-20 rule, like get it 80% there and implement it. Don't wait until you think it's absolutely perfect. And another thing is that you can put systems in your business. You're never going to have a situation covered, every situation, every system, every time. That's part of the fun and flexibility of it, is things will pop up that you'll have to deal with on the fly. But again, if 80%, if those routine things are taken care of, you have more energy to devote to the 20% of things you didn't foresee, like a hurricane in New York.
Speaking of systems, I've actually developed one during this interview of putting my microphone on my end on mute, because there are car alarms and ambulances and cops just racing down the streets, and it's I'm glad that it's not distracting you there.
On my first interview, I had a system of we just had a windstorm, and I had this giant branch in my front yard, so I dragged it in front of my door, and I put up a sign that said, if you ring my doorbell and create noise and my dogs bark during this interview, I will come out and beat you with a stick. So that's my own system for putting everyone on ignore for an interview.
That's pretty funny. This next question, I didn't actually get his permission to ask it, but I know him. He's a good friend. He's actually a fellow YEC member. You might actually know him. His name is Lawrence Watkins. Okay. He runs a couple of speakers bureaus, namely Great Black Speakers, Great Latino Speakers, and last year he launched a product called Great Pro Speakers, where he would teach different people how to how to be a professional speaker and grow your career. So one thing that I've observed about Lawrence and his business, and he's really brilliant, he's really great about seeing how to systemize different processes and accelerate and save time and avoid bottlenecks. But one thing that I've seen he's had particular difficulty with is actually finding a good salesperson and training them to replace him, because he's really great at closing sales himself. So he's like the best salesperson in his company, but at the same time, he doesn't really like that because it bottlenecks around him. So what would you recommend for someone like Lawrence? And I know that a lot of other entrepreneurs, myself included, I tried to put together a sales program to recruit and train different salespeople last year for my web consulting business, and it's tough. But what's been your experience, and what do you recommend for overcoming this challenge, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs face when it comes to hiring and training good sales talent and building a system around it?
Yeah. I think that it's hard when it comes to something like sales, because you can have a very intelligent person and put them in a sales position and they're going to fail. And it's the same way if you take a talented salesperson and make them a manager, they could hate it. And so really, I think the first and foremost thing is finding people who are comfortable and already have some natural skill there, and being able to then, mentor them in a way that teaches them the sales that you want to do, with integrity, with good follow-up, with clarity. And so some of that is just training them on, the company and what we do and the service that we provide and how you sell that, and tricks. But I think it really takes somebody who, has a passion for sales, loves people, wants to make those connections, wants to make the sale, and then, nurturing them in a way to help them understand, what their success rate is, how they can make it better, what are they doing that you're not doing, And then the hard thing with sales is, like I said, you can't create a situation and a manual for every single thing that could come up. So it's really intuitive. And what I find is that when you're talking with someone that they want to buy, a product or service, you've really got to know how the service is going to fit their situation, and also really intuitively feel like what their objections are and be able to speak to that. And it's a tricky thing, because when you are talking about replacing yourself in the business, you have learned so much over developing the company that a salesperson isn't privy to, and they're going to have to work extra hard to catch up. So I'd say most of all, you got to find someone who is really motivated, who has experience in sales, or really has that capacity for sales, and not just pull in anyone who says, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll do that." Because what happens if you don't have really that, I don't want to say like sales gene, because I think anyone can learn it, but if you don't have that passion for it, if you don't know sales, you'll put it off, and you'll find anything else in the business to do so you don't have to call someone. And then, you as the owner get frustrated and the business suffers. So specifically for sales and for Lawrence, I think it's finding those key people, which are not easy to find by any regard. And as you are looking and as you're testing people out, continue to document what you do, but not in a way of, I called Joe responded with this question, I gave this answer, but more of the overarching, like, this objection was really about timing. Was it important? Could we help if they needed someone in 6 months, or do we only fill short term? So in that regard, I would take the system and kind of make it more towards, in this type of situation, here are some things to try. With this type of objection or this type of fear, here's what you do. And that way, it is almost like a sales manual, but it's not to a very specific question. It's to general, and then the right salespeople are going to be able to identify in those situations, okay, this is like Lawrence's example of such and such, here's what I should do next. But it takes a very unique person to do that.
What you're saying is make sure that when you're actually interviewing prospective sales team recruits, your recruiting system should include asking personality-based questions, talking to them about their past experiences, and then if you decide that they are like a good fit, you want to make sure that they are empowered. So really writing.
Well, you've probably heard that interview question where if you're in a sales position, you walk in and they say, "Okay, sell me the chair you're sitting in, sell me that pen." Sell me you is what really sales is. But especially when you're hiring someone, for your company, they should have done some research. So, have them come in and say, "Okay, so tell me about the speaker bureau. Tell me about why we should hire you." And have your candidate start by selling you on your own service and see how well they do. If they're like terrible at it, then there's not there's room to grow, but they may not have the capacity,
That makes a lot of practical sense, Kelly. The next question that I have is from a mutual friend of ours and someone who I know you are good friends with and you work with quite frequently, Patrick Connolly of automatetofreedom.com. And Patrick asks, what systems can I put in place to follow up with the new leads? And this is a really nice segue from the previous question about sales and building a system around training and recruiting other salespeople. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Patrick and I have an ongoing discussion about this, so I'm glad he asked the question so I can answer it for your audience. Really, it's going to depend on your business. I mean, if you have a product and somebody visits your website and signs up for updates, you should definitely have a process of following up with them. That may not warrant you call each person. It may just seem a little out of the blue. But you do want to have a follow-up process in place so that they've indicated interest, and now you can continue to sell them on your product or let them know of specials or new integrations that you're doing. For a lot of entrepreneurs who are coaches or work one-on-one, really, to me, the sales process has to be a little more personal. And I've even done, some sales for other coaches. And I've had people comment to me that they thought it was odd that they were, going to spend, $20,000 or $30,000 with a coach, and the coach wouldn't even call them to see if they were a good fit. So I think that the personalization, if you're working in a field that's really, kind of one-to-one at the service level, it's got to be a little bit more personal, follow-up. And again, I mix it up. So usually an email, making sure someone got, a proposal or a meeting request, asking them what kind of questions they had, what came up, what were they worried about. I once had someone who wanted to work with me, and when I followed up said, it's not about you. I just had, my mother diagnosed with cancer. And so you've got to follow up so you know where they are, because otherwise I could just sit back thinking this person's a flake or they're not ready. And really she was going through a big personal challenge with a disease. So to me, the follow-up, you gotta be on top of it without hassling them. And so I would think of how I would want to be reached out to, like not every day, not 4 times a day, not, on Skype and then on chat and then on email and then on Facebook. I kind of feel like I was getting stalked. And, then really like, what do they need to hear? And not in a manipulative way, but what does your lead need to understand, or what do they need to know in order to make the right decision? And the right decision could be not yet or no, but you want to make sure they're right before they get started. And so again, I usually do a video if I'm working with somebody over a long term and we're going to be doing a lot of implementation and I know that they're a visual person. Of course, I send them a proposal so everything's spelled out, but then I'll just get on video and I'll map it out on my launch calendar, or I will explain it so that they can hear it out loud. And I find that has really great results because it's personalized video. With the software I use, it's not hard to do. Doesn't take a lot of time to upload and send. And, in lieu of being in the same room with someone, a lot of entrepreneurs are working virtually. You are more personal on video talking to one person than, just sending them a sales email.
That is a really, really practical way, I just want to point out to the audience, to increase your sales rate. I remember once hearing a statistic that over time, 44% of all leads will close if they're properly followed up with. Yep. Now, I mean, that's kind of a subjective, how did they actually get that number? But I think it's worth stating that you will close probably twice as much business if you have a good system for following up with your leads. And I'm sure that you've seen this even more than me.
Yeah. So there are some ways to do lead scoring in software. And Infusionsoft, which is what Patrick uses, is really good for being able to set rules. So if somebody has opened your email and clicked on a link, then their lead score goes up. If somebody has gone to your website and downloaded a report, their lead score goes up. And it's all about showing more interest, so you show that they're a hot lead. If you're not using a software like Infusionsoft that automates that for you, I simply keep a list a lot of times of, who the person is that I talk to, if my indication is if they're ready, and then a little bit like what they're interested in, so that when I'm doing my follow-up, I just keep noting it on my calendar. And some people will say, yeah, follow up with me in 2 weeks. Or like you said, now's not a good time. Let's talk at the end of summer. So for each person, use a system that works best for you for tracking. Some people do like reply.cc, where they just send out a note to like pop an email in my inbox in 6 months about this. I prefer to just put it on my calendar. And then my virtual assistant helps me track, oh, we were going to reach out to this person this month for an interview, or that person has a telesummit coming up. You need to touch base with them about sponsoring it. And so I use my calendar to set those, especially with leads. And then what most people fail to do is they'll fill up their entire week, and they're going to do some networking, and they're going to do marketing, and they're going to do serve clients, and they're going to develop a new product. And then they don't have any time to do sales and follow up with leads, especially directly. And so I make a big priority of that, to reach out to people who are ready or almost ready and need to make that decision, and be available for them. So maybe shoot a video for them, do some follow-up clarification, or even just get on the phone and talk through what it is they're concerned about and if it's the right time for them to do this work.
That brings up another question of, where do you draw the line between being human, talking with people on the phone, in person, via video, one-on-one, versus having that process be completely automated to the point where you have no contact with the customers. They just visit your website or use an impersonal touch-tone phone system for all their needs. I mean, some larger B2B companies are the worst at this type of automation, because you get on the phone and then you're just pushing buttons trying to reach a real person. It's efficient for them supposedly, but it drives me nuts as a customer. Another example might be someone automating their Twitter account, where a program just posts hopefully relevant quotes based on your industry, shares links, and pretends to be real, although in perhaps a bit of an awkward, a real person in a bit of an awkward way.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Kelly? Where do you draw the line on automation versus not being like a robot?
I think that some things, like you said in that example, you don't ever want to make automatic, because that's how we get, share this with 10 of your friends, or, the Pope will die spam messages. And it just drives everybody else nuts and hurts the community. For that, I think your automation or your outsourcing is more important, because I think having a community manager or having an assistant who monitors and could even just shadow you for several weeks or months and sees what things that you approve of and what things, okay, that's spam, I need to run that by Matt. And then instead of automating it with a bunch of rules, it can't be determined by like the words that you use all the time. So instead of automating it with software, you would outsource it, in my opinion, to a person who knows the standards of the community, and then anything that they're unsure about, they can bring to you. And again, that's a very small number. And every time they bring something to you, you explain yes or no and why. So you're continuing their education. If it's a general system that you're thinking, well, I've been running it manually for a while, should I automate it? I think you can automate it anytime. You can put it in a software, you can have it running. If, and this is a big caveat, if you're watching it to make sure it's still working. So part of the reason that people will systematize but not automate is that they want to make sure that this is the right thing to do. They want to make sure that that email with that subject line gets a response. And so sometimes it's hard to keep track of that in your head, or even just to remember that you sent follow-ups to 4 leads and here are the ones that got back to you. Instead, if you have it in software and you automate it, you can track those numbers. And that's where the fun really begins, and where a lot of people, I think as entrepreneurs, they see everyone else testing and they don't understand what they could test. But it could just be as simple as, we're following up with 4 leads this week. We're going to send 2 of them this message and 2 of them that message. With automation, you can figure out who opened it, who clicked on links, and who responded. And then, use the better message and keep refining and keep refining and keep testing until you have a sales process or a delivery process that is unbeatable. And that's why I think that you can systematize and do it manually. And, there are some benefits to that. But by all means, automate it if you're going to keep tracking the numbers and making sure that you have the best product out there, you have the best email out there, and that, not just it's the best, it gets the job done, but it serves the need. It answers the question. It, allays the fear. And the person who is receiving it gets the answers and the support that they need to keep working with you, if they're the right client for you. Sometimes messages are designed to repel people, and I love those. I love the please unsubscribe or, stop following me type emails that help people identify if they're the wrong client for you, if they're in the wrong place for this, and that it's okay if they unsubscribe, because you're really only needing to serve a small group of people who are your ideal clients.
I think everything you're saying about systemizing and automating is extremely applicable, not just to building a better lifestyle for us as founders and business owners, but in terms of building a real sustainable business, a long-term business. One of my favorite nonfiction business authors is Jim Collins. He's the author of Good to Great, Built to Last, and most recently, Great by Choice. In Built to Last, Collins repeatedly says that great companies don't, quote unquote, ask what time it is. Instead, they are clock building. They're building a clock, unquote. In other words, instead of running around and guessing as to what task to tackle next based on what fires are, might be burning and need to be put out, you build a great business by making systems for consistency and growth over time, and you bake it into your culture.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that quote from Collins, because it reminds me of something we say in my family, which is my dad, who's the engineer. We often have to remind him, if I ask you what time it is, don't build me a clock. And it's kind of the opposite of, sometimes you do need the short answer. And I find that sometimes I fall into that trap, because I'll be working with a team member and I want to describe like every decision and how we got to this point, what we considered and what we didn't. And they're just like, okay, I just need to know what to do. And as entrepreneurs, we love that like building process. We love the testing. We love interviews like this because we see what works, what doesn't. And then we have to know that, like, while that's all creative and fun, especially for me, you got to distill it down into what time it is, what needs to get done in the system, because your team member, especially the support team, doesn't need to know the whole process of how you got here. They just need to know what time it is so they can support you. And so I think it's a good combination of both, and I like that quote by Collins.
In contrast, you can look at books like The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and he preaches income automation by building a simple business that runs without you and everything is outsourced. But it doesn't seem realistic to me, because for anyone getting into a new business, you have to first invest time to understand the flow of value before building systems around it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone wants to start off with a 4-hour work week, and it doesn't work that way. I mean, I think the most fascinating part of Tim Ferriss's book was that he didn't describe how he created the business in those 2 or 4 years where he was working nonstop. Like, that's where the fun part is for me, not and then I lie on the beach and, do fun stuff. But like the building process is fun for me. And I don't think that it's out of reach for anyone to, reduce their work hours and travel the world and have fun hobbies. But I think a lot of people want to jump to that from day one, and then they get frustrated, and then they, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and they had different expectations.
All right, at this point in the interview, I want to pause and take a moment to tell the audience about our sponsor, which is saberblast.com. Saberblast is a better way to grow your business. It helps you get more likes, tweets, and traffic for your online content without requiring you to spend thousands on ads or begging your friends for retweets. Step number 1 is sign up for free and select your industry categories. Step number 2 is to post a link you want the Saberblast community to promote. Step number 2, post a link. And step number 3 is to pay it forward by finding other relevant content from other Saber Blast members that would be valuable and interesting to your audience. And the more you help other Saber Blast members spread their content, the greater your exposure within the community. So Kelly, for someone in the audience who's looking to get a taste of the benefits of systemizing and automation to decrease the headaches of business, what are some specific actionable pieces of advice you can give on where and how to get started right now?
I would look at your pain point. I would look at the thing that you get and you go, oh, I have to do that again. And this happened to me a few months ago. I do a lot of media, I do a lot of writing, and I got this notification that I had a new submission up at Mashable. And my first thought was, oh, again? And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And I realized it was because, not that I was upset with Mashable or media or anything, it's that I would be writing some tweets, I would be adding it to my media page, I would be putting it in my newsletter, and it was all that tedious stuff. So I don't think you have to worry about if you're ready. Look at what is tedious for you. Look at what comes across like, oh, I need to do that, and you just think, I so don't want to do that today. Like, I don't feel like it. And then look for ways that you can systematize it. You can make it simpler. You can automate it. It could be as simple as one of my favorite systems to teach people is when you get a new subscriber, send them a welcome email. And not a, like, here's what you should buy from me. Just say welcome. It's a one-step system, and it makes a big difference for people feeling welcome in your community. And same way, after you meet someone at a networking event, send them a, hey, nice to meet you email. Those are really easy to template. If you have Gmail, you can use a canned response to just drop it in. And just find something that is like that pain point that's always hanging over your head. You know, maybe it's that stack of business cards that you still haven't entered. Find a way, or start looking at ways to systematize that so that it's one less thing you have to do. And really what systems do to save you is they don't make you do the same thing over and over again. You don't have to write the same email every week. You don't have to create the same template. You don't have to create the same contract every new client. So try to just look for what is the biggest pain in your life right now, the biggest pain in your business, and then start looking for solutions on how you can make that better, because that's how you'll get like addicted to systems. Is you'll find that your life becomes easier, your business is running smoother, and you're just going to look for like your next fix of what you can fix in your business to get even better.
Okay, I think that's a good place to leave it. Kelly, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I think everyone listening to this will have a clear idea of the benefits of systems and automation to their businesses, as well as where they can get started implementing systems quickly and simply.
Yep.
Kelly, what's your website again, once again, so people can reach you if they want to say thanks or possibly discuss working with you?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. So the website is shesgotsystems.com, and all our contact information is there, as well as a lot of resources for, systems that I've created and recommend, software, a lot of media, including we'll have this interview link there. And really, I love getting in touch with people. There's a pretty active group on our Facebook page, just facebook.com/shesgotsystems. And I'm always available and welcome to calls and seeing how you can grow with systems. Because most people aren't ready to jump in and start developing a bunch of systems for their business, I have a daily tip that I put on the Facebook page, and it's something that can usually be accomplished in 5 to 10 minutes. This week it's all about organizing your email and getting more efficient with your email system. And so I do that every day of the week, every day of the weekday, just to make sure that if you're just getting started, or if you're not sure how this is going to work and what you should do first, you get some inspiration and just these little mini challenges. Like I said, they don't take much time, and they're a great way to start seeing some progress in your business without making a big commitment.
Awesome. Once again, the website is shesgotsystems.com. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you all for watching.
Thanks, Matt.